Welcome to AI in Action, Exploring Tomorrow's Tech Today, the podcast where we delve into the groundbreaking world of artificial intelligence. I'm Mari, and with me is my husband, Jim. With our combined expertise in technology and education, we're here to guide you through the AI revolution. Whether it's the latest news headlines or transformative AI applications in classrooms, healthcare, and beyond, we're here to make sense of it all. Together, let's uncover how AI is reshaping our world from everyday encounters to the future of work. So let's dive in and explore tomorrow's tech today. Hello, and welcome to AI in Action, Exploring Tomorrow's Tech Today. I am Mari, and with me is Jim. We are here to cover some of the latest news articles that we have been reading recently. We're going to start by talking about the rise of AI engineers. So this article came out on the 30th, and it is about all the different shifts in jobs that are happening because of artificial intelligence. It's a once-in-a-generation shift that is happening.
It's an interesting article because it talks a lot about the different jobs that were there before. What was it like to be in machine learning, artificial intelligence before versus now? And I think that the traditional jobs are still there, but there's new titles coming out like AI engineer. What does an AI engineer do? And one of the things that really caught my attention is a comment they made in there about how just understanding what's going on in the AI business, the AI world, is almost a full-time job in itself. I know that I spend a great deal of time now just trying to figure out what's going on, where things are going, how they're going to get there, that kind of stuff. So I think it's a pretty good read in terms of kind of where everything is and what some of these new job titles might be. And hopefully it also illustrates the idea that though some jobs are going to go away, new jobs, new titles, new things are going to take its place.
Yes. The next article that we found really interesting was about machine unlearning, which we're going to come back and do a little more deeper dive into that in just a little bit. But basically, it's about Google that's wanting to crack machine unlearning, which is when they're going to go in and take information away from artificial intelligence. So we will definitely come back to that one in just a couple of minutes. Another one was about a 26-year-old CEO who's now being labeled as the Washington AI whisperer.
Yeah, this was an interesting, which we'll talk more about in a little bit too. But I think at every government, every level of government in every country, there's probably that one person that for whatever reason gets kind of picked as the person who knows what's going on. Usually they're probably well connected politically, but at the end of the day, they're the ones that people are going to trust. I mean, at some point when you're trying to figure out something new, you have to find someone or something you can trust as your source of truth for all the information. And according to this article, this guy seems to be the guy. But
Right. I would think it would be like Sam Altman, who is OpenAI's main person, the guy who started OpenAI, and he is definitely in the spotlight. But this kid, I say kid because I'm old, so I consider myself being able to call a 26-year-old a kid. He's the one that they seem to be listening to. So we'll come back and talk about him in just a minute. The next one is about the European companies that are claiming that the EU's AI Act is going to actually jeopardize them across the pond.
yeah, this one was in The Verge, and basically every country's having the same problem. They're trying to figure out how they're trying to show that they have a position on artificial intelligence, how they're trying to manage its growth or manage the privacy or whatever. The EU is kind of taking the lead on we've got to manage the privacy. We got to make sure people's privacy is not being compromised. And at the same time, though, the argument from the technology to companies is always going to be the same. If we do that, other countries aren't. China's not going to put limitations on the development, or some countries not, and we're going to be behind. They're going to rule it all. which is kind of ironic when you think about it, because one of the reasons OpenAI was started, as I understand it, as an organization or a company, was because everyone feared that Google was going to own all the AI, and they wanted to keep it open and open source. So they've been talking about this for a long time, but I'm not sure that anyone's ever going to agree on it.
No, once again, I think people are not going to be agreeing on it. Now, Windows 11 has just announced an insider preview um, for what? It's a preview
Well,
build, is what they're calling it.
I've been trying to get, where I work, we obviously keep the newest operating systems. We know to make sure we can load them and get them on people's machines and things like that. And I've been trying to get a copy of this. Microsoft's all in when it comes to AI. I mean,
Yes.
everyone knows that. And Windows 11 is going to be their unveiling of how deeply they're willing to integrate it, or going to integrate it into the operating system. Windows 11 is already out. I mean, you can get the builds of it, but the Copilot build, that's been a little harder to get a hold of. So they're officially kind of releasing it more. Hopefully I can get my hands on it myself. I'd really like to see what the capabilities are that they're building in and how well it's going to work.
Okay. Um, Insights from Global Conversations. That was an interesting read. It was about conversations across 22 different countries. It's actually released by OpenAI, the company. It is a long read, but basically, we'll come back and talk about this one also in just a couple of minutes. But there's quite a few things or highlights that we're going to tell you about from Insights from Global Conversations. The next one is about a wearable AI device. It's a watch, of course, that you put on your wrist, and it says that it's going to read your sweat.
Yeah, it's actually in the Jerusalem Post and a business innovation section. It's a wearable device. It's different. I mean, obviously, you already have wearable devices right now because your Apple Watch does lots of stuff. But this is supposed to actually. It's the first one I've seen that actually is supposed to look for particular markers in your sweat. In this case, for detect early signs of heart function deterioration, which I didn't know your sweat could tell you that. But I think it's an interesting direction that some of this stuff is going. I mean, AI is really good at looking for patterns, and so I think it's going to obviously monitor things like your heart rate and all the things that they normally do. But when you start looking for biological markers of things that could go bad, I find that kind of interesting. That's why I read this article and threw it in our list.
Yeah, there's claiming that it's going to be a game changer in real time monitoring for your physical activity and your heart health. So, definitely something that if you're concerned, you might want to look into to kind of strap that on your wrist. So, let's go back for a little bit and really do a little deeper dive into some of this. Let's start with the unlearning. When I Jim handed me this article to read, and I was like, what is unlearning? I mean, I'm an educator. You should never have to unlearn something. So that was a word that I was not familiar with. But basically, it is a data privacy or data regulation situation.
Well, it's their attempt at making the European standards especially happy, or all the data regulation happy. If you think about it, when you have this data set with lots and lots and lots of data that you're training an AI on, and then you find out, like they already have, that some of the stuff that's in there either shouldn't have been there or maybe it was just flat wrong. And so how do you get it out? I mean, you don't want to lobotomize your AI whenever you extract a piece of information out of it. So what they're trying to do right now is figure out how to unlearn. I read one time that even humans have that problem. If you were just think if there's a few people that maybe can, but just think if you remembered everything exactly all the time forever. I mean, it would probably make you go crazy. And I assume that they're kind of thinking that they need to figure out how to do this. Plus, they've talked about not just the privacy breaches, but what happens when they call it data poisoning, or something happens where the data itself is bad and they just need to get it out of there because it's wrong for whatever
So maybe
reason.
an intentional data poisoning,
Could
like a
be.
cyber attack of some sort.
So it could be. I mean, you
Hmm.
could put something in there that makes it, it's wrong. The data shouldn't be in there for whatever reason, and you just want to take it out. But like I said, you don't want to lobotomize your AI while you're doing it.
Okay. All right, so this is a way that they're responding to regulation to say, hey, just because we have a very, very large AI system that's been trained on a lot of stuff, we're willing to kind of unwind it a little bit and take some of the information out of it that people say is either A, private, or B, just wrong.
Yeah, and assume they'd like to remove it surgically instead of with a sledgehammer.
Okay.
So my assumption is that's why they're doing this, is because they want to do this in a more surgical manner.
Okay. Well, that article is found in Quartz. And of course, it's found online. And that kind of leads us to the next thing, which is this 26-year-old that caught my attention about how he's becoming the Washington AI whisperer. Now, he started out in 2016. He founded his company called Scale AI. Uh, Dropped out of college to do it. Probably the best decision he ever made, considering
So he's a billionaire
who
now,
he is
probably.
now. Yeah,
Yeah.
but what he does and what Scale AI does is they actually um,
But
give clean data. I
well,
mean,
they attempt to. I
yeah,
mean, the whole point was is that, like I said earlier, without data labeled properly, as Marty said, clean data, you can't train an AI. And so if I understand his company well, it's almost like one of the sort of the gig economy kind of thing where you just work and you get paid as you work. But you log into their company website and they start sending you things, and then you label it. Is this person in Starbucks happy, or is this a unhappy kitty, or is this even a cat? For whatever reason, somebody's got to label all that data, and that's what they do. They provide this data. I thought it was kind of interesting. I did not. I mean, I assumed all this was happening. I didn't know there was a company that was kind of responsible for all of this stuff. But it's going to be interesting to see how they grow next, because I think the days of cheap data are over. When you start talking about artificial intelligence, to some degree, it's almost going to become self-regulating, because the access to data, everybody is building silos. They're cutting off access. Twitter's doing it. Reddit's doing it. Um, Everybody that wants to sell their data is basically saying, we're no longer going to allow the AIs to scrape this data. You got to pay us for it.
isn't like $20 million the going rate right now?
Well, I read an article recently. I don't remember where, but it said that one of the problems you have with these is that the big companies like Google or Microsoft or whatever, they can kind of set the floor for how much people are willing to pay. I'd read that Google went to one of the large companies that they own a bunch of media companies, and said, we'll pay you $20 million. Well, they don't necessarily pay that, because to them it's not a lot of money, but they also know that once they set that number, it's not like that company's going to sell that data to somebody else cheaper.
Right. The little guy can't go in and say, I only have a million. Will you sell me some too?
Exactly. So I think this guy is providing lots of data. He's like everybody else. He's providing data. The difference is that he knows, I guess he's probably known what it's worth the whole time. That's why he's
Yeah.
worth so much money.
I think he started his company in like 2016.
Yeah, it says
So, I mean, he saw this
2016.
coming a long time ago.
Apparently.
And I mean, it says here, part of the article talks about how the workers labeled images or they labeled videos for like self-driving cars and road obstacles. I mean, they started out by labeling it for specific reasons, like for a self-driving car to know what this obstacle might or might not look like. And then it just really grew from there. I think he has hundreds and hundreds of employees now, plus what he employs online. Um, so anyway, let's go on to the next one that we're going to talk about.
Before we leave that one, though, one other interesting thing, when you look at toward kind of the end of the article, he even talks about the cost piece, because the quality of the data before, you could pay somebody, a dollar or not an article, but a dollar an image or an article or whatever. But now some of these companies, they're wanting more. They want their data to be labeled better, differently. And so maybe they want people with domain expertise to label it. Do you really want somebody with no medical training labeling medical images that you're going to use to train an AI with, or medical text? So as they start looking for this domain expertise, they have numbers in there around $40 an hour or something for training. And I don't know how many images you got to do in an hour or how many articles you got to label or whatever they're doing, but it
Right.
certainly seems like the price is going to go up.
So the name of this job is actually called a data annotator. You
That's
know
what it
how you
looks
would
like.
go in and you would make notes on an article, you would annotate your article. Well, these guys are called data annotators, and um, part of it, or something that one of them said, was that he's wasting his life, labeling data. Um, for a couple of bucks a week for these really large companies that are making millions of dollars. So uh, that's a
It's a good read.
totally different subject for another day. It was like that divide that we always talk about, the
Right.
digital divide and
Right.
getting across the divide. So, all right, we're going to move on to the next article. This one is also on The Verge, and it is about the European companies that are claiming that the EU's AI Act is going to jeopardize technological sovereignty. So basically, 150 executives from places all over the place, like Siemens and Airbus and just all over, they said, hey, your regulations are going to cause issues.
Yeah, I think everyone's trying to jump into the regulation bandwagon. I think they're doing it. Unfortunately, a lot of the people's making these laws, it's not like they're machine learning engineers, it's not like they're AI engineers. These people are politicians and they're trying to make rules about stuff that even the people who do it for a living don't understand it as well as they would like to.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that, I mean, Mari, you showed me a senator or somebody talking on a video the other day, and he was talking about how these companies are going full steam ahead. They know that if they don't, they're going to be behind, and there's billions of dollars to be made. So the companies are blasting through this as fast as they can, while they're also saying, "Yeah, we got to have some regulation, but we don't know what that's going to look like. But just don't regulate us too much, because if you do, then we're going to be non-competitive. We're going to go out of business. We're going to whatever." So
Mm-hmm.
I think at the end of the day, there is probably going to be this is going to be going on for a long time, trying to figure out how the heck we're going to regulate this stuff in a way that doesn't squash the whole market. And one of the approaches that's somewhat interesting is the OpenAI with Hugging Face and Facebook, and what they're doing is they're really saying the open source is going to save it. Openness is going to be the thing we need. Maybe that's true. I don't know for sure, but I do know that the private sector is not just going to sit back and go, "Yeah, you're right. We'll just let everybody else do it, and we won't." They want to make their money on it.
Yeah, absolutely. And the person that I was talking to you about the other day, just if anybody wants to know, his name is Jeff Jackson. He is a congressman from North Carolina, and he has an Instagram, Jeff Jackson NC. Just little 1 2 minute Instagram videos where he just basically does plain speak, as I call it.
He tries to.
He really does. He does a good job. So anyway, that kind of brings us into the next thing, which would be the insights from the global conversations, the 22 countries. The highlights of that article uh, basically is that OpenAI's efforts to gather input and perspective on AI. It's a global audience that's involved in this. And all of these different countries are trying to come out on top. They're trying to get ahead, like you said. They're, the ones that are regulated versus the ones that are not regulated. The ones that are being regulated are really worried about the guys who aren't. Um,
I think when you look at
so,
the highlights, what's interesting to me about these highlights that you have is that they are pretty globally shared. It's one of the few times you see something where everyone seems to be in. They cannot agree on how to regulate it, but they can certainly agree on not only the need to, but on some of the basic stuff that has to be put in the regulations.
right, like safety,
Yes.
transparency,
Yeah.
fairness, and then public input.
Yes,
So,
everybody wants to make sure that, and I think that's the theme that when you look at what Facebook and the Hugging Face, the open stuff, the open folks are talking about is they really want to make sure that it's visible, that people can see. Even when you start talking about the labeling, which you go back to the labeling we were talking about earlier, when you have a bunch of people labeling data, the the demographic, the where they're from, their background, all that stuff plays into what people would call bias in terms of how they label it. What you see as happy is not what the next person is going to see as happy, or whatever. And so that kind of stuff has to be factored in. That's a really difficult problem to deal with, but everyone seems to agree it's important.
Well, it's because there's still a human element. Even though we're talking artificial intelligence,
Humans are
it
still
is
labeling
not
it.
artificial when it comes to labeling it. It's
No,
humans that are giving it opinions and data, and
we're just saying what it is.
the old adage of data in, bad
Garbage
data
in,
out,
garbage
garbage
out.
in, garbage out. So humans are still very much involved in the creation of artificial intelligence, and I think that we need to remember that. Um, there's also, it talks about the challenges and the complexities when it comes to deploying AI, and
I think
how
that
the stakeholders they all have to get together, and the stakeholders have to cooperate. They have to all be on the same page when
to
it
some
comes to
degree,
artificial
it's
intelligence.
the same problem they had with the internet. If no one could have agreed, and now they're even starting to break parts of the internet because countries want to control information on it. But if there's not a standard way that people do communicate, use these things, then you don't really get the full benefit of what it's capable of, which being everyone being able to access it. I mean, I think that's really what made OpenAI and this whole market explode so rapidly, is because they put out something that was made AI accessible
Open
to
source.
everyone.
Yeah.
It wasn't just that it was open source, which they're kind of backing off on now anyway, but it was also because we could all use it. I mean, you didn't have to have a PhD, as they said in that article, degree in order to use the AI like you used to. You could just ask it questions. I mean, when Mari and I do training, that's what we tell the teachers and our audiences that we're training is, if you don't know, just ask.
Yeah, and that's a really good segue because we're almost to the end of our little half an hour here, but we are in education. That's what we do, is we train educators on artificial intelligence. We go out and we talk to schools. We're growing in that we're not just doing this within our state. We're hopefully going to be doing this worldwide one of these days. But how does all of this stuff, all of these news articles, all these highlights that we talk about, how does that affect education?
Well, you've said before, educators are slow to adopt typically. The change tends to come slowly.
Well, that's because we've
Um,
always adopted. I mean, if you're fast to adopt in the educational field, I know at least 10 years ago, if I was fast to adopt something, then a year or 2 years later, the program I adopted might not be around anymore.
or it'll be completely different. Technology had changed so rapidly.
Right.
And it's, in some degree, we've talked to teachers before that basically said, I'm going to ignore it until I see whether or not it's real.
Hmm.
So when we do trainings, one of the first things we tell people is, it's real, it's not going away, and here's why. This is something different than what you've seen in the past. And the skepticism you may have is perfectly justified, but the kids are going to they're going to be neck deep in this. There's
Hmm.
nothing they can do to change that. There's too much money to be made in it. And so the question is, are we going to prepare them, or are we just going to throw them into the deep end of the pool and see how well they swim?
Well, it's one of the things that teachers are always going to be that front line when it
Yeah.
comes to educating kids, when it comes to telling them what's out there, what to expect when they get out of. And I'm talking high school. I mean, kids who are in high school, if you're graduating from a K-12 institution and you're not planning on going to college and you're just going to go to like a trade school, AI is going to be affecting you there, just like AI is going to be affecting you if you go to college. And the job market's going to be completely different in 4 years or in 3 years than what it is now because
Different skill sets
of
required.
different skill sets.
Yes, I agree.
So teachers, once again, teachers, you guys are that point. Y'all are the front line. Y'all are the ones that are going to have to educate on something
The next
completely
generation.
new.
Yeah, the next
Educate the
generation.
next generation.
That is
So
correct.
anyway, that's about all the time we have for today. Thank y'all for listening in, and we will be back next week.
And going forward, our plan, as you've told me, is for
Yes.
us to start posting we're going to switch to every Monday. We didn't do that this week because we had an intro thing we wanted to do, but our plan is to do every Monday some kind of update. If you have requests or questions or whatever, then please contact us and let us know, or topics that we should be discussing, because there's a lot of stuff out there. It's like I said earlier, the AI engineer, it's a full-time job just keeping up right now.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yes, and Jim is hooked into a whole bunch of different articles and news and news
newsletters
feeds and everything else.
podcasts.
So he's up early and trying to stay on top of all this. Thank y'all again for listening, and we will see you or hear you, or you will hear us in about a week. And that brings us to the end of AI in Action, Exploring Tomorrow's Tech Today. We're Mari and Jim, your guides on this exciting journey through the world of artificial intelligence. We hope today's conversation has left you with fresh insights and a deeper understanding of how AI is shaping our future. If you enjoyed our discussion and want to stay up to date with the latest in AI, make sure to subscribe and share the podcast with your friends and colleagues. Remember, the future is not something that just happens to us. It's something we can actively shape and influence with knowledge and action. So let's continue exploring, innovating, and taking action. Thank you for joining us today. We look forward to sharing more exciting AI developments with you next time on AI in Action, Exploring Tomorrow's Tech Today.